Starting now.
Wonderful. Hello, travelers. Welcome to Fulbright Week at Reach the World. For over 20 years, Reach the World has used virtual exchange to inspire youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens. This week, we're proud to celebrate our longstanding partnership with the Fulbright program. Fulbright travelers work tirelessly to foster mutual understanding between the people of the United States and other nations. Under normal circumstances, Fulbright travelers share their experiences abroad with K-12 students in the US through Reach the World's virtual exchanges and school visits. This week, we're bringing their stories and the world into your homes. You can find a complete listing of the Fulbright Week live stream events and so much more at athome.reachtheworld.org. Now, today, we're happy to welcome Lauren Peace. Lauren shared her experiences as a journalist and oral history researcher in Pristina, Kosovo, through a recent Reach the World virtual exchange, and I'm so thrilled to welcome her back and to speak more about her time in Kosovo. If you haven't already, please read Lauren's virtual exchange articles from Kosovo. We'll add a link in the YouTube chat bar so you can explore her great articles, photos, and videos from her time there. Now, to our live stream viewers, please use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here and also share any questions that you may have for Lauren. We're going to get to as many of those questions as we can. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome again to Reach the World, Lauren.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. So Chris, should I just get started? And I don't have slides, but I can get started talking about my experience.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So a little bit about me. My name is Lauren Peace. I'm originally from Morgantown, West Virginia, and I'm back in West Virginia now, but I have been sort of dancing around the globe for the past 7 years. I was in Pristina, Kosovo a year ago. This week was actually my last week there. It's still fresh, but we're starting to sort of drift away from my time there. I'm a journalist, so I was working on a storytelling project. I was interviewing people. I was traveling around the country, which is very small. It's sort of a circle, and from the center, you can travel an hour in either direction, and you're at the border. And really getting to know the people in the place through my work. Kosovo itself is very similar to my home in West Virginia. I don't know where the students on here are from, but if you have sort of any sense of West Virginia, it's very mountainous, it's very rural. There's a lively culture and sort of sense of tradition. And Kosovo is very similar in that sense. The landscape is one of the things that drew me in. So picture, rolling hills into larger mountainscapes with water. It's not actually on the coast, but there are lakes. And yeah, so that was one of the things that I loved so much about it and so much about my time there and the year that I spent there. As far as population goes, no, please.
Oh no, I was going to say, just to jump in, I've had the distinct honor and pleasure to visit West Virginia about a little bit less than a year ago, and I couldn't agree more to your description of it. It is an absolutely beautiful place. I don't think many folks from outside of West Virginia necessarily have taken up on the opportunity, but I think it's such a wonderful parallel that you're able to draw from your experiences growing up there to being able to go to a place that is so similar but adds that level of familiarity. I also wanted to just ask you to share a little bit, because I find this to be one of the most fascinating parts about your experiences there. Your work gathering the oral stories and histories of the people that you've met, because I think that capturing the element of not just the people in some, but from their individual stories is something so beautiful and magical, and something that we're able to do with Reach the World by connecting with travelers, especially Fulbright grantees from all over the world. So if you could just talk a little bit about that work that you did, because I quite honestly, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, definitely. So I did sort of a combination of a journalism project, traditional journalism, where you're writing and you're recording stories, and an oral history project, where you're really, instead of driving the narrative yourself, you're letting your subjects tell their own stories. And I got to that approach really because of something that you said, which is it's an amazing opportunity to get to know a place through its people. And I'll add a but to that. But when you're coming in as a journalist, there's this this complicated tension introduced. It becomes, well, if you're doing it right, it doesn't become an extractive relationship, but it's really challenging to be there as an outsider, as somebody who isn't familiar with the culture and with the people, and to come in and meet a population of people and say, okay, now I want you to tell me your stories so that I can then publish them and share them with the world. And that required a lot of trust building. So the work that I did, there were huge pros in it, and that once I did sort of crack the hard shell and get to the center of my relationships with the people that I met there, I really got to experience the place from sort of a really like close and personal perspective that maybe somebody who was there working in a lab wouldn't have gotten to do. But getting to the point where I could really crack in took a lot of time, and took a lot of just being a person and just sort of recognizing the humanity in the people I was meeting, and that even though we were from these drastically different places, we had a lot of things in common. And I think anytime you're a traveler and you're going somewhere new, that's almost the fun in it, is we think of traveling to go and get these different experiences, but a lot of the fun, at least for me, in traveling elsewhere, is to find sort of the mutual connections that I didn't know existed beforehand.
Oh, I love that. And just the I was wondering if you could go into just a little bit more detail, because I think the element of you needing the time to really break in, I think is something that's so important. And I think it also is very much in line with the Fulbright program's mission about not only being an ambassador for the U.S. Overseas, but building those bonds on more than just that kind of top or superficial level. So yeah, just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I will apologize because I think my internet is a little bit delayed, just so everyone knows what's going on when there are those pauses. But no, absolutely, you hit it sort of on the head with that. Fulbright's mission, part of it is this funding to go and do these really exciting sort of academic projects. But the other part of it, which I think is actually the larger part, is just about it's about cultural connection and about creating bonds, and not only being there and sort of absorbing the experiences on the ground from the country that is hosting you, but also bringing your own experiences to share. It's really a two-way street. And so the time that it took to do that, gosh, I wish Fulbright offered sort of 3 years worth of funding, because 9 months is it sounds like a long period of time when you go, and then you get there and you're 3 months in and you're like, oh no, how did time go so quickly? But as a traveler, I think it's really important to be patient with yourself in that sense. I thought originally that I was going to get to Kosovo and I was going to within a week be working really seriously on my project, on my storytelling project. And I got there and I realized that I needed to take the time on the ground to get to know the place before I started working. And that took, like I said, really three and a half months before I was even in a position where I felt like I could start working, and where I felt like I had sort of established myself and taken the time to explore and to experience the country that I was in and make connections with people. It took time, yeah, and it does take time for anyone, I think.
Yeah, I think the importance of that message is how, while it does take time, it's worth more than the time and effort you put into it. That building these bonds and the importance of developing and cultivating relationships is something that transcends borders, it transcends distance. It's something that gets at who we are as people, as humans. I was wondering if you could just share maybe one of your favorite stories from your time in Kosovo, just maybe kind of a quick anecdote, just to capture a little bit more of what life is like, because I'm hoping that we're going to inspire some maybe some students, maybe some families to visit Kosovo from this conversation. So if you could just give us maybe one story that really stands out to you in particular from that time. Right.
Stories, one particular story is difficult, but I will say when I think of Kosovo, I think of being on the bus. And I think of, when I say being on the bus, it could mean in a van that has sort of picked you up on the side that you're paying to travel sort of around the city and around the country. And I spent a lot of time in transport, and the things that happened while we were on the bus, it could have been collaboration or cooperation, and somebody had decided that they needed to move long planks of wood for whatever purpose from the city center to the rural countryside, and now all of a sudden the bus is stopped on the side of the road and you don't know why, and there's these huge planks of wood coming in and filling the space, and you're sort of helping out, you have it on your shoulder. There was a time where a chicken was on the bus. There were times where we took a sharp detour because we had to drop somebody off specifically at a special location that was not part of our bus route. And I guess what I'm getting at in that is that there's a real sense of flexibility that we in the US maybe aren't used to. We have scheduled bus routes and the bus comes at a certain time and then we go. And in Kosovo, riding the bus is a completely different experience. You have to be up for whatever adventure presents itself. And that sort of seeps into every facet of life there. It's a much slower paced country in the sense that people take more time. When I first got there, would try and invite people out for a quick coffee, where I figured, we would get a coffee, we would chat for 30 minutes, and then they would be on their way. Coffee in Kosovo, you sit for hours. You sit for 2.5 hours, slowly sipping on these little teeny cappuccinos. And really just giving your time to people and to everything that you're doing. So gosh, that was a weird way of framing all of it. But I think the key is it's a really warm, inviting, fascinating place. And you just have to be sort of flexible and willing to go with the flow and adjust once you're there.
I'm starting to hear a little bit of a theme that everything takes time in Kosovo, and the reason that it takes time is that just everything moves slower. And how lovely is that? I know I live in New York City, and we have a stereotype of never wanting to slow down, but something that in my family we've talked a little bit about is that because we're kind of stuck indoors most of the time, we're being forced to slow things down, and there's something nice to that, and it's something that's important, I think, to learn. So I'm going to begin our transition to speak with some of the other really wonderful people that we have on today's call. But before I do, we did just get a really wonderful question that I wanted to share with you, because this is actually from someone named Karen, who is also a Fulbright alum, who also served in Pristina in Kosovo. And so she wanted to know if you could describe the collaborative efforts with non-governmental organizations or NGOs on the ground, including the Pristina Oral History Project.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a great question. I don't know if Karen is talking about my personal collaboration, because I very much worked very independently. I was supported by Kosovo 2.0, which was an arts and politics and culture digital publication there that does absolutely incredible work. But my project itself was not in collaboration with the Kosovo Oral History Project. That said, the one of the women who runs Kosovo Oral History Project was a part of my project and was highlighted and featured in there. So I don't know, I'm not sure if that answers the question. I guess I would say that there are a unique number of NGOs on the ground in Pristina that create space for really exciting work specifically around arts and culture. At least that was my take from it. And so that certainly created opportunity for me as somebody coming in to connect with groups that had already begun these sort of initiatives and had already established themselves and were doing really, really interesting and inspiring work. I'm not sure if that answers it, but was my
I mean, it answered it for me, so definitely good enough for me. So I wanted to also introduce a couple of the other folks that we've been able to welcome to this call. So one of whom is also another former Fulbright grantee, Tanya, who is also now an educator in Minnesota. And so Tanya, welcome. I'm so happy to have you as a collaborator and educator within the Reach the World community, but also as a former Fulbright grantee, and also one of your students, Lydia. So at this point, I wanted to see if either of you had any questions for Lauren as we open things up and start having a little bit more of a conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you, Lauren, for doing this. I know I have a question, but I also know that Lydia had one. So Lydia, if you want to ask your question, I'll give the floor to you.
Hey, thank you. My question is, have you done any traveling before you get to Kosovo?
Yeah, Lydia, that's a great question, because I know in my group of my Fulbright cohort, so there were sort of 5 of us who had gone, we all had very, very different backgrounds and different sets of experience with traveling before we got to the country, which sort of informed our time there. I had done some traveling previously. Through my family. My mom is Lebanese and my dad is English. So a lot of sort of traveling growing up to connect with family. But I had never traveled independently and I had never traveled for work. I had always sort of had a purpose, you know, not that I didn't have a purpose, but I had a reason to be going where I was going that was totally different than my reason for going to Kosovo. And so my experience as a traveler there was nothing like I had ever experienced before, even though I had traveled and I sort of did come in feeling like, well, I can do this. I'm used to this. Some of my friends had never been out of the country or never really spent any time traveling even within the context of their families. And so it was interesting to compare experiences because I think even though I came in with some experience as a traveler and maybe a friend came in with no previous experience as a traveler, when we got there, we were really starting on the same platform because we were both new to the country that we were in, and we were both new to the experience that we were having. Yeah, so does that answer it for you? If you have any other questions that sort of pop up from that, I'm happy to talk to you more about it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And my question, Lauren, I'm a language nerd, and I know many of my students are multilingual and they have those skills. And so I was wondering, with your investigative journalism, what was your experience with the different languages like when you were in Kosovo? And I know reading from your Reach the World blog that you had encountered a few of those. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, another great question and something that's really fascinating within Kosovo too, if you're a language nerd and for anyone interested in languages, because there are so many within the teeny tiny country. So in Kosovo, the primary language or the language spoken by the most people is Albanian. Now, there's also Serbian ethnic group who speak Serbian within again the same country. It could be villages 5 minutes apart. I mean, you're getting these different languages. There are different dialects of Albanian. So the Albanian spoken in Kosovo is completely different than the Albanian spoken across the border in mainland Albania. There's Turkish spoken there. There are Romani languages. So just to preface your question with that, it is a fascinating place for anyone interested in language. Yeah, I'll start with that. I chose, coming in and knowing that there were all of these options, I chose to speak or to learn to speak Albanian, the dialect spoken in Kosovo of Albanian, because I thought it would be the most useful for my everyday interactions. I had some previous experience learning Spanish, but I had never really spent time or energy on learning a new language. So I was really timid going in and nervous that I just wasn't going to be able to do it. But by the time that my Fulbright had ended, I was speaking Albanian regularly. I was sitting in coffee shops, eavesdropping on tables next to mine. And yeah, it was really just amazing, sort of the combination of the lessons that I was taking, but also the immersion that I had in the place, how much I picked up. And then when I went back to New York, I was thinking to myself when I was in Kosovo, I'm learning Albanian and I'm never going to use it again. I went back to New York the following year, this past year I spent there. And one of my first assignments was to embed with an Albanian community in the experience. So it's wild the way these connections are made. So in conclusion, I'm sorry I went on so many tangents there, but in conclusion, I did learn Albanian while I was there, but for the oral history projects that I was doing, I took translators with me when I was conducting interviews in Albanian, just to make sure that no meaning was lost in the interviews that I was doing.
And just to insert something else in here, I wanted to also plug the previous live stream event that we hosted with Lauren a couple of weeks ago, because Lauren actually speaks a lot about the language acquisition, and I think she goes into a little bit more detail actually about how she realized that she was becoming much more fluent in the language because she accidentally started eavesdropping on others in a cafe, which I think it's a really wonderful story. But she also talks about the cultural influences, especially through food, that it's not just the language overlaps, but it's that when people come in and are speaking different languages, they're bringing all the other elements of their identities with them, and how they all are able to really beautifully overlap within the greater conversation, and it's a really great thing. So I actually do have another question from the chat that I would love to share and ask to you, and this is from Tony. He says, you picked a country off the beaten path. Any advice that you would give students?
Yeah, great question, Tony, and good observation. I certainly did, and that was, to be honest, one of my favorite parts of my experience and about it. And now with opportunities like these to come back and whether it's in a sort of Zoom setting like this or just in conversations with my friends, my friends bring this wealth of experience and knowledge about a place that just so few people know much about, and that I didn't know much about prior to going. Was really it was wonderful and it was exciting. If you're wondering how I ended up in Kosovo, that sort of comes down to these random connections that I had made through a professor at my university that just sort of extended and resulted in me being there long term. But when I did begin the Fulbright application process, or even just the process of thinking about going abroad, I knew very little about Kosovo. I had one conversation about the country with a professor of mine, and I took it from there. I became fascinated because I knew so little. You know, had the conversation been about another country or a region of the world that I was more familiar with, whether I was really familiar with it or if it was just sort of these loose references that allowed me to feel like I was familiar with it, I wouldn't have plunged in to my research the way that I did. My experience starts with a Google search. Like I Googled it. It started on a Wikipedia page and then extended to sort of more legitimized resources beyond that. But it starts on Wikipedia, it starts on Google Maps, on sort of zooming into the region and saying, Kosovo, where is that? What surrounds Kosovo? Okay, so it's east of Italy and it's north of Greece, and it's in this mountainous region. And then I go to YouTube videos. I Google, what does Albanian sound like? What happens there? And that's sort of the initial process. And that for me ended up in this very formal sort of research opportunity. But at the beginning stages of traveling anywhere, but really somewhere that you know so little about, is admitting to yourself that you know nothing, and to the people around you that you know nothing, and being excited about the opportunity that allows for you. And then sort of putting on your investigator hat and Googling and checking it out. And who knows what will come from sort of basic curiosity.
The two things that I love about what you're doing are things that every single person who's watching this call or who will watch this call can do. Number one, talk to others about where you may want to go, whether it's teachers, and I'm older. I have kind of finished my college time, but I still have people that I consider my teachers. So you can go ahead and ask those people. And if you're a student, like Lydia here, you can ask your teachers just like Ms. Wachholz. And then the other thing is, and this is something that we are all probably doing a lot of right now, since most of us are still stuck in our homes, is that explore the world through Google, through YouTube, definitely through Reach the World. Of course, I have to say that, but to take those opportunities and see where they overlap. I think those are two really great lessons that we all can take away from this. And we actually have another question from Karen, and I think this is another great one. And so she wants to know, were there stories you felt compelled to share? What was involved in making the decision to share one story or one community perspective over another?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I had thought about a lot going in. And one of those things that sort of, I went in with a plan because I had thought a lot about it, and I had planned ahead, and I was anticipating all of the different problems that might arise, or questions that might arise. And then when I got there, it totally changed. Everything changed, and I had to adjust. So I went in thinking that I was going to tell stories specific to women in Kosovo who were acting as catalysts for social or political change. So sort of working as movers and shakers in one form or another through arts and culture. So I went in with this very sort of narrow, specific lens that I was going to find people through. And a lot of the stories that I told did sort of build off of that. But I found that as I was having these conversations with women who I had identified or connected with, or been recommended to get in touch with, through that scope, I ended up having more and more questions about sort of something else that was happening that maybe didn't fit that mold. And so my mold became really flexible. And I was lucky as a storyteller. A lot of times you don't have that flexibility. Because of Fulbright and because of the opportunity, that they extend to really do independent work, I had the opportunity to be flexible and to sort of just follow my curiosity in a way that I had never had before. And so my end result, I had more than 99 conversations, but it was narrowed down to a pool of 99 conversations and stories of women, so specifically women in Kosovo, but across the board from various ethnic groups. I think the youngest person that I spoke with was 14 or 15. She was a student, and the oldest was in her mid-70s, who was an activist before the war and sort of had continued work following. And so at the end of the day, I ended up with a project that I really just wanted to capture a breadth of experience of women in the country. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Awesome. It's just awesome. I don't have any other words than to describe it than that. So we're getting close to the end, and I wanted us to end on a question from Lydia or Tanya, or both, depending on who, if either of you have a question. So if either of you have a question, we'd love to be able to wrap up our conversation with one from either of you or both of you.
I guess or Lydia, go ahead.
No, I just I want to check. Yeah, I don't have any more questions.
Oh, okay. So my question, I guess, is, yeah, what are then are the next steps, do you think, for you and Kosovo, if, you know, obviously things open up again? Are you planning on visiting sometime soon? Are you planning on going back? And would you, if given the opportunity, stay for a longer period of time?
Yeah. So I was just on a Zoom call like this last night with the group of Fulbrighters who I was in Kosovo with, and we were having that same conversation, like, how do we feel now a year out, and do we miss it, and will we go back? And my answer is, you know, absolutely, I would go back and I would invest more time. I am currently, I just took a job. I'm part of a new project back in my home state of West Virginia. So it's really interesting, having been away from home for so long and traveled to Kosovo and sort of been refreshed with this idea of home, and sort of making those connections, and now to come back and actually be back in West Virginia is amazing, and sort of in reverse apply what I had experienced there to my life here. So I'm here for now. I'm going to be here for the next year or two at least. But in the future, I would absolutely be open to going back to Kosovo. And I do think that whenever I'd go somewhere for work next, if it's in a grant form, or I sort of have the opportunity to go and do another long form project, I would want more time. I would want more than 9 months. I think 9 months is just enough time. You know, I'm sure I could go for 5 years and I would say the same thing, but I think 9 months is just enough time to sort of really hit your groove and start to feel like you're a part of something, and then you have to leave. So yeah, I would definitely do that. And then I just want to add really quickly, going off of what was said a few points ago about starting your search online. One of the really interesting things that I found in one of the stories that I had told in Kosovo, it was a woman who, she was 22. She was incredible. She was an astronomer, and she headed an astronomy outreach program in Kosovo, the only one that existed. And she got into astronomy through making connections online, in the same way that I had sort of found out about Kosovo. She reached out to astronomers in the US. She ended up organizing to have a telescope sent to her. It was her very first one. And sort of just, it was the same thing. It was a sense of curiosity and working with the resources that she had. And she created these incredible connections. And now Kosovo is in the process of possibly, after sort of COVID, getting the first in-country planetarium or observation sort of center set up. And that stemmed from her being a high school student, being, you know, a teenager with access either through teachers or at home or through school to the internet, and sort of making connections and asking people to help her along the way. So I would just recommend to any students out there, if you can, you know, reach out to people online or talk to your teachers and have your teachers help facilitate that for you, because there are people out there who are really just a wealth of knowledge and excited to share what they know with people who are curious about it. And I see we're over time now, so I'll stop there, but that's sort of my final 2 cents.
I mean, what a great message to end on. And I think there is something so inspirational about sharing a story like that. And I know we've all heard many similar stories about it really just coming down to having the passion and initiative, but to hear that it came from something as simple as just doing some research online. And as long as you can really put that energy behind it and ask people like your teachers, like your friends and other mentors, that really amazing things, first in the nation things can happen. I think that's exactly the inspiration that I want to end on. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and obviously to Lauren for sharing your global journey, but also thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Lydia, for being on camera and asking your questions and sharing a little bit of yourselves with us as well. Thank you to our entire live stream audience for going on this little bit of a journey with us. And again, please take a look at Lauren's previous live stream from a couple of weeks ago and her virtual exchange journey on reachtheworld.org. Lastly, please join us later today because we actually have 2 more live stream events. So we're going to be taking a tour of Morocco with Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant Sofiane Essaroui. And then we're also going to be talking about Kenyan culture and cuisine with Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant Medina Mahat. You can see actually the full lineup of Fulbright guests yet to come at athome.reachtheworld.org. Thank you all again and see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.